Okay, class, today we're going to start our chapter on quadrilaterals. We're going to start with parallelograms. And the first characteristic we know about parallelograms is that both pairs of opposite sides are parallel. So that means AC is going to be parallel to BD, and that means that AB is going to be parallel to CD. Okay? So AB is parallel to CD, AC is parallel to BD. It's kind of why we call it a parallelogram. The next thing we know is that opposite sides are congruent. So AC is going to be congruent or the same size as BD. And AB is going to be the same size as CD, but not necessarily the same size as the other two. So AB is equal to CD and AC is equal to BD. The next thing we know is that opposite angles are congruent. Okay? So here what we define as opposite angles would be angle B is congruent to angle C. And A is opposite D, so A is congruent to D. But if you notice, they're all four not congruent. B and C are acute, A and D are obtuse. So they are not all four equal. That would be a different shape. And the next thing we know is that consecutive angles are supplementary. Now if you remember, consecutive angles are when we have one after another. So AC are consecutive and BD are consecutive. Now if you remember this picture where we have parallel lines and a transversal, if you look kind of this side, doesn't it look like the left side of a parallelogram? And then this side looks like the right side of a parallelogram. That's where we get the idea of consecutive angles. You can think of this as angle A, and this is angle C. And we know that A plus C is supplementary. It adds up to 180. And you can think of this as angle B, and this is angle D. So we know that B plus D also adds up to 180. The next thing we're going to talk about is when we have diagonals in a parallelogram. So here we have these two diagonals that are drawn. And when we have diagonals in a parallelogram, the diagonals are not congruent. And that kind of ties into what we talked about in that last chapter. If you look, since angle A is obtuse, that means that CB is going to be longer than AD because angle C is acute. Okay? And if you think about it, if I kind of took these and drew them as triangles. So we have C, A, B. So there's one triangle. Let me go ahead and group these together. So we have this first triangle here. And then we have another triangle that we can draw. We'll do, oops, let's draw a different one. We'll make it a different color. We'll do this in red. And then if I have A, C, D, and I'll group those together as well. Right? We have two different triangles where this is my first diagonal, BC, and this is my second diagonal, AD. And if you notice, there is no way that those two are the same length. Okay? So since our parallelogram is slanted, our diagonals are not going to be congruent. Okay? But the one thing we do know is the diagonals bisect each other. So they may not be congruent, but they cut each other in half. So AE is going to be congruent to ED, and CE is going to be congruent to BE. Okay? And so like we said before, AD is not equal to CB, but when we draw those diagonals, they bisect each other. So AE is congruent to ED, and EC is congruent to BE. Okay? And we'll do some practice problems tomorrow in class.